This is the second in a series of hospitality webinars that we've been hosting. And today I'm delighted to be joined by CYNDY Tan JARABATA, the CEO of JAJARA Hospitality here in the Philippines. Today we're going to be discussing how COVID-19 is impacting the Philippine hospitality industry. JAJARA is one of our leading hospitality consultants here in the region, and has been working with many hospitality clients and developers across the Philippines over the last many years. And recently they've completed a very in-depth report into the current status of the hospitality sector within the Philippines, and really trying to gauge the impact of COVID-19 on the hotel and resort sector, and understand some of the mitigating circumstances to limit the fallout, and really having a quick assessment on how the industry will begin to build the foundations for recovery. So welcome, CYNDY. As a bit of a preamble, we believe and we see some positive aspects in our business. And we believe that the epidemic appears to be at some sort of turning point. We're beginning to see some economic changes in some of the countries that have already been through COVID-19, particularly in China. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of heavy impact on our industry, and I think we all need to work hand in hand together to build the foundations for solutions. The hospitality industry itself, well into the crisis, and at times like these, hotel owners should really continue with their rationale to keep their eyes on the long-term game. Understanding we have to deal with the immediate effects of the virus. We need to deal with the facts of today, and we need to plan for the future. Okay, local hotel teams are running complex businesses, and to achieve their budgets, maintain brand standards, retaining and managing their associates and their talent is a really challenging task, let alone dealing with the customers, which in some cases are still in-house and in some cases locked in, like we are today. At the same time, owners continue to seek sustainable returns and achieve this, in the operations they have today, but also thinking about what the new normal will be in the hotel industry. So to kick off today, CYNDY, perhaps you can take us through your report's initial key observations, and we can understand a little bit more about what the sentiment is in the Philippines today.
Hi, good afternoon. So when we did the report, it was pretty much during the shutdown. And so it was really also quite tough because you were trying to get owners to sign in, but at the same time, of course, they're going through closure. So what was interesting was that when we got the 10-year, we backtracked to about 10 years ago in 2009 and tried to see pretty much how we progressed through the time. If you see pretty much the visitor arrivals during the time, when we were actually in 2019, we actually hit about 8.3 million, which is pretty much like, I think for the first time in 10 years, we're able to meet forecasts of Department of Tourism. But it's pretty much still slow compared to how you compare to other of our Asian neighbors. But if you look at our domestic travelers, it's 110 million. So this is pretty much what fuels the country's tourism economy. So for this slide, there were about 72 respondents to the survey, and a total of about 11,000 keys. But most of those who filled up the survey pretty much belongs to the upscale and also upper upscale. And we also decided to divide it among, aside from Metro Manila, we also had a good respondents coming from Cebu. And at the same time, in terms of location, we broke down cities, all those who actually answered per city, depending on where they are, like located, and also resorts, primarily because we wanted to get pretty much the sentiments of how the resorts as well. So total number of hotels in the city were about 82%, resorts about 18%. For Metro Manila, 36% was actually in Metro Manila. Cebu was about 32%. But the big chunk is pretty much in the upscale and upper mid-scale, which is, the total composition was like about 50%. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you look at, well, one of the things was that we wanted to get the sentiments of people also as to how they feel COVID-19 will actually affect their operating performance. And how far this is going to be in the next, how far do you think that they will feel the crunch? Most actually answered that this is within the 4 to 6 months. But let's not also forget that even if we open, let's say we're pretty much, the lockdown is over, there is still some sort actually even go to the new normal. There is going to be an interim normal, as I would say, because not people are actually really totally back to normal. But there's some people who also responded that this will actually take on, the change or the effects will actually last as long as about 6 to even 12 months. And most also said that 71% will say this is much worse compared to say SARS or the H5N1, and even some would actually say it's actually just going to be worse. But also again, during the situation, I'm pretty much an optimist, Tim. So yes, I mean it's going to be maybe worse or much worse because it's a pandemic compared to say how SARS was, wherein it was a little bit more regional. I mean, in this situation, the situation is pretty much like the whole world actually feels. In a lot of our key feeder market, it's actually from other countries. I mean, from other countries as well, aside from domestic market. But just remember that the way when this was also when the SARS and also the other diseases were actually when there was an outbreak, the way we communicated and the way our travel patterns were also different. So we'll anyway, in the next slide, you also see how how the respondents actually pretty much felt on how occupancy will be affected, average rate, and also total revenue. So here it says that in terms of occupancy, most of them feel that there will be a 71% or more decline during this period on the first half of 2020 compared to 2019. Average room rate, there will be a decline of about 41 to 50%. And overall, in terms of total revenue, there will be a decline of about 41 to about 50%. Next slide, please. However, for the entire year of 2020, compared to occupancy, that there's going to be a decline of about 51 to 60% on average rate. Most actually said there's going to be a decline of 41 to 50% and a total revenue of about 41 to 50%. When we were also going through the survey, some areas were not particularly that affected. Like I noticed some of the Clark hotels, they had to take in BPOs. And I think that also goes for some of the hotels in Metro Manila, where if you are close to a BPO or a call center, they actually go to your hotel and change of atmosphere, and it became like their work from home situation. So this is some of the changes that some of the things that we recognized during this closure. And of course, right now, I think Department of Tourism pretty much have their hands full. They're requesting hotels to also open to take in the overseas, the OFWs, and also the seafarers. So you do have, I talked to some hotel owners and they say that some of the hotels are pretty much booked up until June. So depending on which area you are, which region, your occupancy actually would also change. And although most actually did say that they have to take pretty much a crunch in terms of average rate. Next slide, please. So in terms of road of recovery, we felt this was quite important for us to discuss. Most actually say in terms of the corporate, so we broke it down into corporate and leisure market. So most said the first to actually bounce back is domestic market, which is about 57%. then you have pretty much compared, of course, to foreign. But on the MICE market, domestic will definitely bounce back faster compared to foreign MICE market. For leisure travelers, FIT for domestic will definitely, I mean, people, the essential travels, I mean, people would definitely go out quite sooner because they need to. I mean, we're still a society where we still want to meet people, although it's going to be a slow return. But domestics definitely compared to even foreign. If there's anything I also recognize, also it depends on, it would actually all depend on how the travel restrictions would be. So in terms of domestic, so that's something that we still have to find out, whether is it going to, will the airlines actually be open after May 1st, or is it going to be, are we going to wait for another 2 weeks? So these are things that we still don't know in terms of policy change. And going back to leisure also, in terms of group business, domestic market will definitely bounce back much quicker compared to leisure group foreign. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we ask the hotel operators and owners was that what are you actually even doing now to mitigate the COVID-19. I mean, in terms of you going back to operations, most say that in terms of strategies, they'll do a lot of sales promotions, they'll do advertising, reducing room rates, and others. One of the things we'd always caution owners is, we do understand that you need to fill up your hotels, but drastic reducing of room rates will also affect you in the long run, and that has been proven in previous in previous not only outbreaks, but also when, I mean, with 9/11 and so on. But we do also, at one point, of course, owners also have to make sure that they make their balance sheet, their cash flows. Those are really the key concerns right now. So what were the measures taken of hotel owners and operators? Number one is, of course, freeze hire, postponing capex. I mean, when we did this, remember, it was just the country was about to go into a lockdown. So I think at one point, I would say the top a lot of this were actually practiced. So from freeze hiring to postponing capex, mandatory clearing of paid leaves, reducing headcount, and also reducing F&B hours. So not only F&B hours, I think right now a lot of the food and beverage outlets, and including all the restaurants, are closed. And some of the hotels I know are also closed this time. Next slide, please. So most also expected that they would get government support, 79%, almost 80% of them. And in terms of what kind of support, most of the hotel owners and operators did say that they would want more aggressive marketing promotion supported by the Department of Tourism. I think aside from this one, Tim, I'd say that there should probably be some sort of a citywide or a resort-wide or a destination-wide kind of promotion to work hand-in-hand with the Department of Tourism. This is obviously a pandemic that our government couldn't handle on their own, so they do need a lot of help from the private sector. The other part that the private sector would expect would be tax incentives. So we took note carefully on the a lot of the owners said, can we actually they wanted to look at how government would actually reply in terms of, say, how the tax incentives, not only income tax holidays would be, and including property taxes. And in terms of government subsidies, aside from the cash handouts, maybe part of the subsidy is to look at, let's say, how much tax the employees would make, or, I mean, they're not going to make too much this year, and some would actually even lose their jobs. So these are things that people would like to know what the government is up to. But I'm also a strong believer that there should be a more of a approach in terms of working with government. The private sector also has to step in. I think that ends our, yeah, okay. So for email us, there's a more comprehensive report, and this is just like a breeze through what we've actually put together.
Yeah, and then we will be, everybody that registered, everybody Regis will get a copy anyway, and you know, feel free to drop your questions to us. Just a comprehensive study in a relatively short space of time. I mean, we were hit very quickly with this, and certainly some of the findings are not surprising, but I guess very interesting for us. But you know, the hotel business, you know, the hospitality business, certainly in the Philippines and mix of very small, independent boutique resorts right up to the big operators. You know, what do you believe? You know, the smaller SME developers, those small resorts in some of our beautiful destinations should be doing, and what lessons should they be taking to mitigate, you know, risk first, but more importantly, moving ahead, you know, revenue protection in the future. How do they get that? And, you know, how will their business need to be different moving ahead?
Well, Tim, the thing with Tim, it's not just the SMEs that's affected. It's pretty much also the bigger companies. When I talk to owner operators, they'd say the first thing they did was, of course, to cut costs. Maybe if there's any space that you need to convert into something that would be, let's say, the takeout counters or things like that. So you change. One of the critical part is to redo your entire P&L. You have to kind of be in a mode of like when you have just opened the hotel, so less manning. For those that have loans, Tim, I'd say if you can secure a short-term loan for working capital, and also maybe if you have to go back, you probably have to go to the banks to do some restructuring loans if needed. What's important is also be cautious. You talked about manning earlier, so be cautious about just cutting manning. One thing good with the hospitality, because people in the F&B can be trained in housekeeping. There was a situation that I was in some years ago, wherein we had to do some, when you say multi-skilling, it was really just training people. So like 4 hours, people would be, let's say, in one department, another 4 hours, people would be in another department. So this can actually be done. And with the millennial mindset, they also want to be trained, and they actually also want to actually learn new skills. One of the things I would highly recommend is that for hotels to have some sort of a defining difference compared to your competitors, so which means you have to look at how you are marketing yourselves now. So these are things that I would normally recommend both an operator and an owner.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, certainly lots of challenges that, you know, whether you're a large hotel, big developer, or a smaller property, you have to consider. You know, before we entered into this crisis, the hospitality industry was one of the bright lights of the Philippine economy, the second, you know, largest employer, contributing massive amounts to the GDP. So surely we're going to see, you know, some changes moving ahead. A couple of questions related to that. Now, how do you believe that growth will decline, and when do you think we'll start to see developers getting more confident to start to kick off their projects again?
Okay, so well, in terms of well, there's what I call the interim norm. So people are talking about the new normal, but there is like an interim normal first before we actually get into this new normal. So in terms of, you're saying about pace of recovery, is that it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just about pace of recovery, but, you know, we had a lot of growth. There was a lot of new projects, a lot of the new major brands. I think the international hotel pipeline was very strong.
Yes.
We are seeing a lot of new independent resorts. I mean, clearly this is going to make people think twice, think differently. You know, what do you think the impact of this decline is going to be?
Well, for developers that I work with, they're not holding back yet. I think they you know, if the development will take about 4 years, 3 to 4 years, they know that things will rebound by then. So if you are in the planning stage, some of the people I meet, they still proceed with planning, although they take a little bit production by next year. If you're a resort destination, some people may decide to just land bank, maybe to lease rather than develop. So depending on which region or location you are, the decision making is also different. The other part is that how you're able to acquire the land. I think it's, if there's anything, and I give this back to, say, the real estate industry as well. The price points also of land and real estate has gone so high. So at one point, I guess one of the things is that it reboots us to say, okay, what is the proper land price for a particular area? And at one point, this is how you also strategize as a developer. You have to strategize now in terms of how you are going to develop a certain property. What mixed use component are you supposed to incorporate? In terms of, I think, how developers' expectations would be in the next few years, I think they'll be more prudent. My assessment, they'll be more prudent. They'll be more aware of risk now. So there are things that to also mitigate that. So there's, I was talking to a couple of developers, but one of the things that they need to look into is, say, you know, how their cash flows are going to be, and maybe inject some crisis management fund in the future.
Yeah, big challenge, especially we know, you know, the capital that needs to be deployed into developing a hotel. We know that, you know, large hotel developments here are relatively new in terms of an industry, and we'll begin to see the resort destinations grow. But how about the capital markets? You know, a lot of developers are looking for development loans. There's banks that have liabilities in this. I mean, how do you think the banks are feeling at the moment? And do you think they're going to still be supportive of our industry?
I think so, but everyone would be cautious. I mean, we are in the interim, again, situation right now. I obviously cannot predict what happens in the future. However, I know that banks would think of it that if it's still a good investment there is a need to develop, they would definitely want to fund. They also, I mean, if there's anything, is that for capital markets and even developers themselves, they want to make sure it's also the right hotel model in the right location. Because we meet with owners who are in, sometimes the strategy is just more centric into catering to a more China market. If there's anything that we all learned, I think there should be some sort of a cutback in terms of reliance in China. Owners definitely will be more also prudent in terms of spending. So putting the right product, putting the right model into a destination actually helps. And if there's anything I would recommend to hotel developers and owners, is that maybe there should be better negotiation in fees when it comes to hotel operators. So this is pretty much the time to really rethink that. So the patterns of how we used to negotiate to deal with either the banks or operators or another, you know, if you're going to a JV, will obviously change. The way we process things would probably be a bit longer. So those are the things that I would probably predict.
But at the end of the day, you know, Philippines is still the bright light of the industry, and I think, you know, from everybody's perspective, with the growth of infrastructure, we've seen the new international airports, the new gateways. I mean, Cebu is an amazing example of what can happen and how it can affect our industry. So, you know, we do hope and that the infrastructure projects will continue as soon as possible and open up these new destinations. I mean, have you had any feedback on that?
Tim, I think when you said about gateway destinations, that's quite important in terms of how we have placed the Philippines altogether. If I'm not mistaken, there's like 24 or 26 gateway destinations in the country, and that has also international flights. So one thing good is you don't have to get to Metro Manila or Cebu to get to, you know, any place in this country. So that at one point, with this whole social distancing, restriction of travels, the more gateways we have, it actually helps. But in terms of, let's say, planning for the next destination, I think there's more focus now in terms of, you know, putting investment into a more the cities definitely. You know, I believe in terms of resorts, there might be a bit of a slowdown in terms of resort developments, but in comes to city where the travelers are, I believe a lot will actually be considering that. However, just when it comes to resorts, one of the good things as well is that for us to kind of just go back in terms of how we planned. I think in terms of future development, people will have to look at um, uh, I mean, I believe like we've done quite a number of budget hotels here, but like is of 16 square meters enough? I mean, I think people with the social distancing, people would like a little bit more space. I mean, I don't know about the feeds, but like even with resorts, I think those are things that we have to really reconsider. So space planning will have to be reviewed. The way we operate will have to be reviewed. The way we borrow money will have to be reviewed. Because there's going to be a new normal. There's definitely going to be a new normal.
Yeah, I mean, clearly everybody's going to be, certainly for the foreseeable future, going to be questioning, the need to travel, who they travel with, and even jumping on a bus or a plane or being in a restaurant. I mean, clearly it's going to cause concern to people. And I guess the new normal, is going to be one of the mysteries that we have to we have to figure out over the next few months.
Yeah, but Tim, is there's anything also when it comes to, let's say, the MICE market? People think the MICE market will kind of bounce back. I think it will take a little bit more time. The FIT travelers I think leisure will pick up the business. Yes, definitely. MICE will take some time. And that's the reason why I mentioned earlier the way we even design the hotels. So are you really going straight forward to big, putting all these big conventions and so on? But let's not forget, this is a situation where this is totally unprecedented. We're talking about regional outbreaks, but now that it's really a pandemic, it's a totally different kind of. So we don't also know how we are going to behave later on. But if there's anything about the Philippine market, we are so resilient. I've never compared our country or our market compared to, say, other countries. And if there's anything, we always like to also meet with people. There's always this connection that we are always trying to look forward to. Meetings are always on a handshake. So I just don't know how far we're going to take this later on.
It's certainly going to be an interesting future. Cindy, we just have a few minutes left, and I'm going to throw the real curveball question now, which is always tough to answer. The question is, the crisis won't last forever. Now, if we had this proverbial crystal ball, how long, and what are just a few key points for our listeners and for the industry to consider if they had a crystal ball moving ahead?
So consider this, there's two phases. There's an interim normal, and there would be a new normal. For the interim normal, for the interim part, MICE business will take some time. People will definitely be needing more space. They're still trying to get used to this, to this situation. We'll be more concerned on safety and security. So hotels will have to really focus on how to beef up security and safety measures. When we have HACCP as looking at, say, how, as rating guideline for our kitchen, I think there's an opportunity for other companies to maybe put together on how we clean our rooms. And I think because people would actually be looking at how pretty much safety and security and how you're able to get hygiene and put together in a hotel will be, remember that we act on this primarily because there is also no cure. There's still no vaccine yet. So we don't know how we actually how we can fight this. But remember, Tim, in any destination that you travel to, there are always risks. Like malaria in other areas. Like I would remember traveling to Palawan, in those ages where malaria, there will always be a risk. The flu has actually also been there. It's just that we don't know how to fight back yet. And I think I totally believe that people will travel again. We need to connect, and we are ultimately social beings. But if there's anything that's going to be probably fade a bit, would be the mass tourism. I know for a fact that people travel because, they want to be on Instagram or, will be the first to actually say, hey, I've been here. I think that market will slow down and there would be more experiential travel that people would actually, if you're not traveling for business or if it's not an essential travel, people would definitely want to travel with more of an experience in mind.
Yeah, great point, Cindy. And I think resilience is one of the key things we have. I've been here in Asia for 26, 27 years. I've seen the hospitality industry through many crises. And,
Pretty much Filipino. You're pretty much Filipino, huh?
Pretty well in the Philippines, but also Asia. And,
yes.
every time there's a crisis, we come back stronger.
Yes.
Whether it's Asian financial crisis, global financial crisis, whether it's SARS, whether it's tsunamis, whatever, the typhoons, the industry come back strongly. So I think,
and with technology,
we've just got to remain positive and strong.
Yeah, and with technology, I mean, it's so fast to pretty much get a booking these days. Everything's on your phone. I mean, I think that's the reason why we also feel this way, because even we are in our homes, but because of all these I mean, with all the things that we hear right away, I mean, but I'd like to see how China bounces back, how the US can take this, Korea, South Korea. So I mean, these are the key markets, and even during and even when we check all the hotels, pretty much in the past 10 years, our key markets are pretty much the same. But if there's anything, we should probably also look at other markets. I mean, it's important for us to also try to see how the domestic market would also respond to this. And I strongly believe, and if there's anything, the Filipino market or domestic market, they always have this national pride. So I think if there's anything we have to do, and even Department of Tourism would be, is really focus on how we give back to the country, which is part of travel here first before considering traveling overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. CYNDY, and we need to work towards a wrap up now, but I think some great insights from CYNDY. The report is really, really worth reading.
Thank you,
everybody, and they, certainly CYNDY and Horwath have done a great job in putting this together in such a sort of short amount of time. But CYNDY and I urge everybody, some kind of adaptation plan of sensible practices, and we are on hand. That's JAJARA Hospitality, the NAI RCL Hospitality team, the Horwath Hospitality teams. We're all here to help. I mean, we all compete against each other, but we're all family. The industry is a family industry, and we're all here to help. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can connect with us, obviously through the link that you registered for the webinar with. And we wish everybody well. We hope that you return to the new normal as soon as possible. Thank you for all attending. Stay fit, healthy, and well, and enjoy the rest of the week. And we look forward to moving into our 6-week of lockdown next week, everybody. So,
oh boy.
Yeah, thank you again, CYNDY. Terrific. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Bye, Tim.
Bye-bye.